I'm going to say something that might go against everything you believe about parenting. You ready? It's that consequences don't teach. I know you were probably taught that kids need consequences in order to learn their lesson. We now know from neuroscience that that's actually not true. And this is why you have to repeat yourself over and over and over again or do the same consequences because the kid actually can't think in outcomes. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive a little deep into the neuroscience behind consequences and even rewards, why those aren't helpful either, and then what you can do instead. Kids need consequences to learn. That is a belief that we have all been told. And maybe it's not something that we were told. I definitely have heard this, but it could be just the way that we were parented, the way we were treated in classrooms. If you are a teacher, you may have been taught to do this behavior management, classroom management. We need to use punishments or consequences or reward systems in order to get our kids to behave in the way that we want them to. The problem with all of that is that it's not addressing the core root of what the behavior is. The core root is typically that it's an unmet need or a lagging skill. And if we want to teach the lagging skill, kids' brains do not have what's called executive function, the higher sense, or it's up in the prefrontal cortex. It requires, or it's where we process task management, organization, time management, logical thinking, rational thought. Executive function is what makes it so we can think in outcomes. And a lot of times, even adults don't think in outcomes, and kids simply don't have the development yet. Another part of this is whenever your kid is behaving in ways that aren't wanted, they're typically dysregulated. And that causes, even if they did have some access to be able to think in outcomes, they did have some access to that frontal cortex, that frontal lobe, to be able to make good decisions, and whenever they're feeling good, when they're dysregulated, that is typically when they're behaving poorly or in ways that we feel like we need to correct and we don't want them to behave that way anymore. That goes offline. They don't have access to it in the moment, and instead their brain goes into alarm mode, and that is where we find the fight or flight response. And a lot of kids, that looks like fight. So whenever the brain is in stress, it goes into survival mode, and that means it's no longer in learning mode. And that is what we're wanting to do whenever we give our kids consequences, is for them to learn. Also, you cannot shame or punish a nervous system into regulation. It just doesn't work that way. However, this is what parents did for lots and lots of generations. And then the adults become adults and they have a lot of challenges when it comes to these types of things, or may struggle mentally because they weren't given the need, they didn't have their needs fulfilled that they had growing up as a kid. I learned so much about punishments and rewards in Alfie Kohn's work. He has written Punished by Rewards, and also he has written Unconditional Parenting. It made me realize I had so many conditions on my parenting or the way I interacted with my kids. Even though I thought I was loving them unconditionally, there were lots of conditions. It's like, I won't do this, or I won't lay with you, or I won't cuddle or snuggle with you until you do X, Y, or Z. That's putting conditions on your life. Your kid just needs you, even if they're, I almost said acting like a turd, and there I did. I just said, even if they're acting in ways that you're, feeling like you want to pull your hair out, it's still really important that we are showing up and giving our kids what they need. Kohn also found in his research that punishment produces compliance through fear, not through helping them develop or learn the skill, which is what we want. And it doesn't come from internalized values. That's something else. Don't you want your kids to be able to behave well or make good choices when you're not around and it coming from their internal compass instead of just doing it in front of you because they're afraid of you? There were parents, especially in America, for generations that wanted their kids to be afraid of them. Now we're realizing that's probably not the best approach, especially if we want to raise resilient, kind, compassionate humans who will turn into adults one day. Kids also, whenever we punish them, they're not learning, oh, that was wrong. What they're learning is, I got caught, or I need to get sneakier or better at this behavior so I don't get caught again. Again, that's not what we're wanting, right? And so we see some short term behavior change. Maybe the consequences do work in the moment, but it's not leading to long term learning. Then we get into this compliance trap where parenting just becomes about your kid complying with you or obedience or obeying you. And you can still get those same outcomes by meeting their needs and teaching them the skills that they do not have. They aren't born with all these skills to be able to behave in the way that we want them to. Okay, you may be thinking, I don't do consequences, but I reward my kid, or I give them so much praise when they do something. And that is something that Alfie Kohn has learned in his research as well. And lots of other people have done research on this, on human motivation, and Carol Dweck on growth mindset, and Angela Duckworth on grit. Lots of people have written about this. And what happens is if we focus on rewards, and or even praise, especially empty praise where we're not really even acknowledging what they did to get that praise, then what happens is it's all about external control. I'm only doing this to get that thing. When that thing isn't exciting anymore, and especially for neurodivergent kids, it wears off pretty fast, then they no longer are going to behave in the way we want. We want it to come from internal and help them develop what's called an internal locus of control. External rewards also decrease intrinsic motivation. And over time, it might get to a place where you're constantly having to bribe your kid or maybe threaten a consequence or bribe with a reward. And then your kid will just lose all internal motivation to do that thing. Or I have a kid with pathological demand avoidance, and he begs us to bribe him because he needs control. He has this really, really high need to have full autonomy, even in situations or things that he doesn't quite have the development to make the best choices. And so it's tricky where we have to balance it, but he will flip it on us. Well, I won't do this unless you give this to me. And then it helps us realize, oh, okay, we just got caught in a cycle that we do not want to be part of. And there's a classic study about preschoolers who they noticed that they loved drawing, loved to do art. Then they took 3 groups, and they had one group where they were told, you're going to get a certificate or some kind of reward if you do the drawing. And then there was a group where it was random. And then there was a group where they did not get a reward, weren't told that they were going to get a reward. Then they came back and were given opportunity just to free play again. And they found that the kids who were told they were going to get a certificate ended up drawing less. It's because it was becoming more about the reward than it was about their intrinsic motivation to draw in something that comes from interest and passion. Then the group that was not told that they were going to get a reward stayed the same. And so did the middle group as well. And what happens is rewards then undermine what they may already want to do and what that internal motivation is. And what happens is It basically is communicating with kids that, it's saying, I don't trust you to make good choices on your own. I'm going to control you into making them. Self determination theory, which is the theory of human motivation, tells us that kids require, not kids, all humans, you, me, think about this. We all require three things to be motivated: autonomy. We want to do it ourselves. That's why 2-year-olds say, me, do it, me, do it. They are telling you from a very young age that they have this need of being able to do it themselves, even though they might not be able to do it the way that you want them to. They have this need that we can help scaffold and we can help fulfill. And then 2 is competency. We all want to feel competent. We want to feel like we can do it. And 3 is relatedness or connection. We are relational beings. We are wired to connect. Kids are wired to connect to their caregivers, to us as the people who are in charge of them and have brought them into this world. They are wired to need that relationship and that connection. And that's why it's so important that we connect before we correct. I talk to so many parents and I have worked with lots of teachers, and whenever they hear, hey, let's stop using consequences and punishments, and I give them all the reasons that I just shared with you today, the question always is, then what the heck do I do? If I can't give them a consequence, what do I do? I've even had parents who have graduated from my parent purpose transformation program. They come back and get more support because even though they know connection is the number one way to help kids learn and to work on these skills and do it through play and relationship, there's this default and this core rooted belief, again, that we have, a lot of us have gotten from childhood, that says they need a consequence, especially when their behaviors start getting risky or their behaviors start getting scary. And we start going down these shame spirals of what are kids going to become if we don't stop this right now. The only way we can stop this behavior is by giving them a consequence. What they have found is by giving those consequences, the behaviors are getting worse or bigger because the consequences taking control away. The teenager saying, I want my own control. I'm just going to do it behind your back then. And then it becomes this big cycle. Instead, we put all of the consequences, the punishments, the rewards, we just put them to a side. Sometimes, yes, kids need certain consequences. There's natural consequences, and we kind of talk about that. What we want to do is put all that down and then really see the child beneath the behaviors, see them for who they are, be able to connect and communicate that I care about you no matter what you do. That is how you start to build skills, because then when they feel connected to you, they want to learn, and you're helping them turn that part of their brain on where they do have access to be able to learn. You might be listening to this, and if you truly believe that consequences teach, which you may, and that's okay, I did for a very long time, and then I started to see how it was damaging my relationship. It was not teaching my kids anything. It was causing them to want to lie and sneak behind our backs. And instead, I found a different path. And I also see how shifting away from consequences has helped hundreds of students in small micro schools. It has helped families that I work with. But if you're thinking, okay, if I don't have consequences, what do I do? Can't just let our kids get away with whatever they want, or can't let them run this house. I hear you. I completely hear you. And there are things that you can do instead of needing to resort to consequences. And the first step is to regulate yourself. Become aware of what you feel. Where do you feel it in your body when your kids are behaving in a way that you do not like? What are you thinking? You may not have access to this in the moment. Outside of the moment, do some reflection. Pay attention to what the narrative is. Pay attention to maybe the story that you're telling yourself. It may not actually be true. Pay attention to where in the body it can typically be hands or chest, your face, your jaw. Where is that? That's the first step to regulating yourself first. Become regulated. Work on your belief systems and your paradigm. Then we validate and empathize our kids. We want to name what's going on. Figure out what the emotion is beneath the behavior. Figure out what lagging skill they have or what unmet need. Get curious. Become a little parenting scientist and get curious on how to help them in the moment instead of just needing to come up with the consequences that you now know aren't super helpful because kids don't have access to that part of their brain that would make it so that they actually would learn from the consequence. Also, so we want to connect, then we want to correct, we want to teach. We can do this through play. I have a play with purpose parenting class. It's super fun, teaches you how to do this. And then you can also let natural consequences do their thing. There's a caveat to this as well. We know that just giving random consequences, a lot of people do have heard that that's not very helpful. Then we're told natural consequences instead or logical consequences. Yes, absolutely. However, it's not necessarily going to teach your kids the lagging skills they have. They're going to learn those through connection, through play, through exercises, through modeling from you doing it, from seeing other people in their life doing it. That's how they're actually going to learn the skills to make the change in their behavior. Okay, that's what I have for you today. Remember, behavior is always communication. You don't need consequences as an intervention for behavior. You are the intervention. Now go raise those kids with purpose.